Welcome to Morning Cup. I'm so glad you're here today, and today we are talking about COVID burnout. So you might have heard of just burnout, right? But it was termed back in the 1970s, the first time it was ever talked about. But with COVID, I really wanted to highlight this because it's something that keeps coming up when I've looked at research and studies in the last few weeks in particular, because I was very curious because there's a lot of conversation around burnout with COVID in certain industries, but not in others. So I wanted to highlight some that are not maybe talked about as much, but I've definitely seen some stuff about it. But the thing is, burnout is one thing, and COVID burnout is a completely different element as well. Because you can be stressed out about stuff, you can be overwhelmed, but burnout is like the next level of it. And then with the last 2 years, really, of dealing with COVID and everything that's come through that, with whether it's financial stress, emotional stress, physical stress, your health, everything in your world completely changing or staying the same, but everyone around you's lives are changing. So I really wanted to highlight this because especially so many companies decided to work remotely, or had to work remotely, I should say, versus some business owners that worked from home already. But there's a lot of studies that I wanted to talk about today because I just felt like this information is important to know and to be aware of. So if you do start to see signs or symptoms of this, you can do something about it. But as a result of all the stuff I was reading, it became really difficult for people to understand what the boundary was between work and home, especially if they have children and they were helping them with the schoolwork while the teacher was on Zoom or Teams or whatever technology system they were using, but being able to do that and work and be present for everything and take care of themselves and take care of the household. There's just a lot of factors going on. So according to BBC article that I read, 46% of women felt the impact opposed to 35% of men. And this is around that boundary of creating work and home, that separation. 24% of women stated about the pandemic negatively impacting their own work-life balance, opposed to 16% of men feeling those effects. So one of the things I really wanted to highlight in this whole video today is called burnout break. This term I just recently came across, and I was like, oh, this sounds great. So back in June 2021, Bumble, if you're familiar with Bumble, it's a dating app. It's also like you can make friends, and they have like Bumble Best Friend and Bumble Biz for business purposes. But they were able to have their 700 employees have an entire week to themselves to regroup. And I love this term, and I was so fascinated by it because I've never seen it before. But it's really about taking time to regroup and feel refreshed coming out of that week. Because I don't know about you, but I know like in the past, before I became an entrepreneur, it's like I would take a vacation and I would need a vacation from my vacation. So, or even if you are an entrepreneur or a business owner, sometimes you experience that as well. So it's just something that really I think is such a great move in a great direction to really have work-life integration in a positive, healthy way that is going to benefit all parties involved, the business owner, the employees, and everyone's families as well, because you're going to feel better if you're taking that break, that mental break too, because it's not as obvious when you're suffering mentally versus physically. And so that was the first article that I read, and I was just like, wow. So I wanted to read more. I was like so intrigued. So I came across this article on Kaplan, and I'm going to link it below in the comment section so you can read it too. I just found it really interesting. But this individual, Martin Inaulant, who has been fighting for mental health for entrepreneurs and other workers for 30 years plus, like a very long time. And what I wanted to focus in on was a few things. But the first thing, the entrepreneurs that had businesses that were not essential to the public, to what people needed during COVID, had to close their doors. That's terrible. Like industries like the event industry, any events, tourism, weddings, catering, sports. It's an emotional roller coaster already being an entrepreneur, but you tax on unable to pay expenses for your business, not getting reoccurring customers and clients anymore, not able to pay your business expenses to keep your business afloat. Like you're unable to pay rent or pay for the things that you need in order to run your business effectively. And when things happen that continue to happen like this, and there's a lot more stress, the stress starts to pile on, but there's no outlet for that. And it continues to create the sense of burnout because there is no break, there is no relief from it. And that's really important to remember, because another study I read on working business owners went from 15 million, and this is from the US, but 15, so 15 million in February 2020, so right before the pandemic really started, or lockdowns, to 11.7 million in April. That's only 2 months later. And that's just nuts. Just if you think about how many people were impacted, just not on just one level, there were so many different layers to it. 3 things that really stood out to me after reading all the research I did. The first thing was emotional or physical exhaustion is what really kicks off burnout, when it's like the stress is just, it's gone to that next level like I was talking about earlier. But the emotional impact that is having, because you are not getting a break, you're tired, you're irritated. If you've ever had those experiences of just being really tired, but it's not even like you're doing a lot of physical activity, but like you're just feeling mentally tired because you're thinking 1 step ahead, 10 steps ahead. How am I going to pay for this? How am I going to make this work? And luckily, a lot of business owners were able to pivot, but not everybody was able to pivot. And that's what's the heartbreaking part. But it's not even just the emotional aspect, then physically. Like physically, you're just going, your energy, if you're up at all hours, you're not able to take a break from what you're doing because you're like, okay, well, I need to make rent. I need to make sure I can feed my family. All these factors, even if you got help, funding, whatever it may be, it's still exhausting. So it's remembering that, like, if you're feeling that, that is a sign of burnout, not just stress. And then the other aspect is, like, if you're exhausted, you're not going to be as effective sometimes. Like, sometimes you're like, oh, yeah, like, I can be up all hours. Like, I just actually commented on an Instagram post the other day, and they were talking about, like, have you stayed up for more than 24 hours? And I, like, in the past, have stayed up for maybe 48 hours, and, like, I will never do that again. That was in the beginning of my business where I was learning boundaries, learning work-life integration. That's why it's the first and foremost pillar of my business as well, because I think it's so important to have that integration and know when enough is enough so you don't create that cycle again, or you catch the cycle sooner of burnout. So the third thing is a sense of being disconnected from work or family. So you don't feel attached to what you're doing. You feel maybe just, you might get resentful or irritated or frustrated on like not a level 1, maybe a level 100 or 10, somewhere in between there, extreme numbers, but being able to disconnect and understanding that. So like those 3 things are something to really start to be aware of. But the last study I'll talk about was a study done in the UK. It's from Startup Donut. I'll add that link too, but they said that 2.9 million small business owners have experienced burnout since the start of the pandemic in 2020. And that's a significant number. But if you think about it, how many people have been impacted? Not just maybe financially they're doing fine, but they're having to pick up the slack because they couldn't afford to pay for their employees, or they're having maybe their partner isn't working anymore, or maybe they were by themselves or had a roommate and the roommate no longer lives with them, or whatever it may be. There's so many factors that play a part in a small business owner. There's not just one entity is what I'm trying to get across to. And it's burnout doesn't discriminate. And if you aren't taking care of yourself, it's going to show up in your mood first and foremost, how your energy is, your habits. They're going to go out the window sometimes because you're just trying to play catch up constantly. So it's really important that you are getting rest on a regular basis. It's the small details and tasks that you do day to day that become habits that are really important to prevent burnout, because burnout is a real thing. I've experienced it. I know so many people have experienced it. The more I've been in the entrepreneur world, and like I have learned about this as well, but I think it's really important that it is in every profession. but the main thing is take care of yourselves. So thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe, like, comment. What did you resonate with? What did you find interesting? And definitely check out the links. I'll add those right now too to this video. But thank you so much and see you soon.